Retro.
What's up, guys? This is Daniel Logan, Boba Fett from Attack of the Clones, the Clone Wars, Book of Boba, Skywalker Saga game, and hopefully many more things in the Star Wars galaxy. You are listening to Jay and Dennis on Podcast Stardust. Yep, this is the way I've spoken.
Hello there, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we are back with the 10th installment in our Revenge of the Sith series. But before we get into that, Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody of what our social media contacts are?
I sure will, Dennis. We are on Instagram and Facebook, conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the dishes aligned, the signals boosted to maximum output, shields down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So this is part 10 of our Revenge of the Sith series. If you are new to the podcast, what we do is each year we take a movie that is celebrating an anniversary that ends with a 5 or a 0, and we break up the movie into 11 or 12 parts, and we do of about 10 to 15 minutes each, and we discuss just those 10 to 15 minutes in an episode. And that usually takes like an hour to an hour and a half to do because we find all kinds of things to talk about. So again, this is part 10 of our Revenge of the Sith discussion. Normally we bring in a guest for this, but we had to shuffle the schedule around this month and we weren't able to make that happen. So Jay and I are going to do it ourselves. We usually started off with questions for our guests about their experience with this movie and what they remember of seeing it and the like, but not this time. But at any rate, we are covering the portion of the movie that runs from 1 hour, 43 minutes and 43 seconds to 1 hour, 54 minutes and 21 seconds. So let's dive in, Jay. Mm-hmm. I have to say, I sat down to write the notes for this and I got so engrossed with it. Like after like the first minute, I just stopped taking notes and I watched the whole thing. And I was like, oh, wait, I was supposed to be writing stuff down for us to talk about. So I actually had to do it twice. And halfway through the second time, I realized I wasn't getting any of my trivia questions written either. So anyway,
wow.
Yeah, this portion of the movie is just really captured me. And part of it is because it is so action packed here. And,
for sure.
you know, after you get past the initial conversation between Anakin and Padmé, and then Anakin and Obi-Wan, and then a little bit of back and forth between the Emperor and Yoda. It's just pretty much all action after that. So, but let's get into some of the details. We're picking up with Padmé having arrived at Mustafar, and Anakin has spotted her ship land, and so he comes running up to her. They embrace, and Padmé goes on about how worried she is about him, that she's heard these terrible things from Obi-Wan about how he's turned to the dark side, he's killed younglings. And then Anakin comes back with how Obi-Wan is trying to turn her against him. And I want to pause right there for a second. Do you think Anakin believes that at all? Or is he being manipulative here?
I think Anakin at this point, he has so lost touch with reality in so many ways because he's completely shut himself off from his emotions in terms of what he's done to the younglings. And I think that he had to go to a different place, in his mind just to be able to do that. But for Anakin, he's always said that Obi-Wan is jealous. He's holding him back. So, even though the two of them were like brothers, I do think that there was a part of Anakin that always felt that there was a piece of Obi-Wan that he couldn't trust. So I don't think that Obi-Wan was trying to turn Padmé against Anakin in any way, shape, or form, especially after going to Padmé's apartment and trying to talk to Padmé about Anakin. Obi-Wan was so out of sorts about it. He was disgusted. You could see he was physically sick when he was trying to tell Padmé, what was happening. So if he did turn her against Anakin. I think it was not necessarily his intention. It was because of the things, as Padme says, because what you've done, what you plan to do.
Yeah.
So that's my take. But what do you think?
Well, I guess more specifically, what I'm asking about is that does he believe any of what he's saying to Padme here, that that Obi-Wan is trying to turn her against me? But really, when I'm thinking about it, it comes off like gaslighting, because he did in fact turn to the dark side and he did in
Hmm.
fact kill younglings. But
Right.
he's kind of just writing all, brushing all that off, that, oh, Obi-Wan's just trying to turn you against me.
Mhm, mhm. And,
Yeah.
here's the thing too with Anakin, I mean, Padme knows that Anakin has done terrible things before. I
Hmm.
mean, when we go back to the Tusken Raiders and his attack on the camp, Padme knew all about that and the anguish that Anakin had suffered because of that. I mean, you think back to, and it wasn't just the men, but the women and the children too. And he was anguished at that point. So, in some ways, I hate to say, Padme, are you really surprised? But yet again, this is a different situation too. And not to justify what he'd done in the past, but I think Padme tends to compartmentalize the things that Anakin does and
Yeah.
not necessarily see a connection, perhaps.
Yeah. I kind of feel like, she made this trip because she didn't want to believe it, but
Hmm.
she, deep down, she probably, Obi-Wan's not a liar that way.
Right.
We
Hmm.
know, of course, the problems he has with the truth when it comes to Luke and telling him about his past coming up, but it's not like Obi-Wan's gone around telling lies before in all of this. And but she was desperately hoping it wasn't true, and so she came to talk to Anakin, and he immediately gaslights. He immediately deflects in this situation.
Hmm.
Oh, Obi-Wan's trying to turn you against me. She follows this up by saying, he cares about us. And then Anakin says us, and then Padme says he knows, he wants to help you. It was like almost a micro expression a bit, but Anakin kind of had like this disappointed look on his face that Obi-Wan had found out about this. Did you catch that at all, or what was your thought on that?
Yeah, perhaps a little bit of disappointment on that. And I think that some of it too was the fact that this was their secret,
Yeah,
and for Anakin, it was his probably one of his most prized possessions at this point. And we all know how much Anakin loves his possessions, Padme included. And so I think for Obi-Wan to share in that secret was for Anakin a little bit of a betrayal.
yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly what's happening there. She follows this up by saying, "Anakin, all I want is your love." And then he says, "Love won't save you, Padme. Only my new powers can do that." Okay. Does he really believe that? Do you think he does? And does he have to believe it? Because at the end of this discussion, when everything is starting to fall apart, he's basically telling her, "I can overthrow the Emperor and you and I can rule together, make everything the way we want it to be." Well, doesn't he still have to learn this power to save her?
Right.
Or is he just drunk with the situation? One of the things I'm getting at in all this is that, the Jedi catch a lot of flack because they didn't accommodate Anakin. The fact that he came into the order differently and he had this attachment to his mother, and could they not have bent their rules a little bit for him? And some of that may have some merit. But at the end of the day, he makes some wildly bad decisions here.
Mhm.
I don't buy that he was driven to this, that he had to make this decision here because he withheld the truth from everybody. But now that he's in this position where he's taken up Palpatine on his offer, where he can learn this power to cheat death and save the ones they love, he's bargaining with Padme like, I can overthrow the Emperor. I'm more powerful than him. And we can rule the galaxy.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I'm not even certain that, I think, to me, it's almost like he's trying to you know about my nightmares. This is the way that we get around those. Those were nightmares, for crying out loud.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I think what you said about Anakin kind of being drunk with power is a pretty good statement, and it's a pretty good reflection of what's going on here because you can see it in his eyes and in the way that his voice kind of rises and falls. It's almost like he's a split personality, or
Mhm.
he's got these grandiose ideas of things, and he's got the crazy eyes, and he's just like, I can make everything, we can make everything the way we want it to be. But I mean, realistically, Anakin is just fractured. I mean, he
Yeah.
is not even a whole human being at this point, emotionally and mentally. He has been pulled in so many different directions that I don't think he knows, what is right at this point. And everything is spiraling towards his destruction, and you're watching this just fall apart right in front of you, and you know that that's what's going to happen. But I do think that he believes that he has those powers to save her. But like you said, how is he going to get them if he overthrows the chancellor?
Yeah, the other part of this is that there's a difference between, they're both pleading with each other here.
Mhm.
Anakin is pleading with her, it's like, which is it's a possessive way here. I did all of this so that I don't lose you, so that I get to keep you, is what it
Mhm.
comes down to. I betrayed the galaxy. I slaughtered younglings. I just came here and slaughtered the Separatist Council, and I've done it all for you. And oh, that's not enough. I will overthrow the Emperor, and then we can rule the galaxy, and you make things the way we want to be. We want it to be. And she's like, I don't need any of that. I just need you in this.
Mhm.
But he still keeps making the argument to do it in this
Right.
situation. So it's like, where exactly did the obsession with saving Padme's life mutate into this desire to control everything?
I think it goes back to his mother, because he couldn't save her, and
Uh-huh.
he felt like such a failure because of that, that he felt like he could have done that. So there was a loss of power in that way, and his mom was the only other person that truly believed in him, and especially from a very young age. And so I think he sees a lot of that selfless love in Padme as well, and obviously he's in love with her, but she becomes his possession because of that fear.
Mhm. Mhm. And then this all comes really crashing down at the end where, Padme says, I don't believe what I'm hearing. Obi-Wan is right. You've changed. And he is just so disgusted by this. I don't want to hear any more about Obi-Wan. The Jedi turned against me. Don't you turn against me. Well, again, the Jedi never actually turned against him here. They didn't give in to him.
Mhm.
And, for all of his complaints that the Jedi don't trust him, and Padme saying, oh, they trust you with their lives. Well, he also didn't trust the Jedi ever to let them know about Padme, that he married her, that they're expecting a child. Trust is a
Right.
two-way street. And kind of turns out that maybe they were right not to trust him because he isn't living up to his vows. And he so did not live up to his vows that he turned to the dark side and wiped out the order to get what he wanted out of this.
Mhm.
I
And he
mean,
had Sidious or Palpatine the whole time chirping in his ear, "They don't trust you. They don't trust you. Why aren't they giving you this mission? They don't trust you." So he had that always in the back of his mind.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I find that my sympathy for Anakin dwindles quite a bit the farther we get into this movie here.
Mhm.
It's he's a cool character. We grew to love him in the first two movies, and of course, what we know of him in the Clone Wars and stuff like that. But I am just a lot less forgiving of the choices he made than I think a lot of people want to be. So,
Yeah, yeah, and I think he's just in a manic spiral at this point too. It almost seems like he's even barely aware of what he's doing and what he's saying. Like I said, he's got those crazy eyes and just, all the things.
right. And it's
So
funny. I was thinking of the Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy Pieces of the Past final episode that we just discussed at the
I know what you're
last
gonna
week,
reference. Uh-huh.
where Jedi Bob is basically saying that it's to Solidus that it's never too late
Mhm.
to do the right thing and get this redemptive arc here. And
Mhm.
Padme is trying to get that point across. She says, I don't know anymore. He's gazing up at the boarding ramp to her ship, and Obi-Wan's there. We just haven't seen him yet. And Padme has said, I don't know you anymore. Anakin, you're breaking my heart. You're going down a path I can't follow. And then he says, because of Obi-Wan. And he's looking past her. I love the way he delivered that line, by the way. And then
Yes.
she says, because of what you've done, what you plan to do, stop now, come back. Even at this point, she's still reaching out to him. She's still extending that olive branch to quit the madness and come back. You don't
Right.
have to do any of this. And then he screams, I love you. She says, and then he also, the perfect delivery, the way he just yells at her, liar. No, you're with him. You brought him here to kill me. So he's very paranoid
Chilling.
at the
Yes.
moment.
Chilling. And, honestly, at this point, what really was holding Anakin back from leaving with Padme? The Jedi were no more. He didn't
Yeah.
have to betray the Jedi Order, quote unquote. He could have just left with her. But he was so, as you said, drunk with power and thinking that, these actions that he was taking could somehow not only save Padme, but rebuild the galaxy, rebuild the entire, like he said, we can make things the way that we want them to be. I have brought peace to the galaxy. Notice how he
Yeah.
said that too. I have brought peace to the galaxy. Well, Sidious told him that you have brought peace to the galaxy, my young
Mm-hmm.
apprentice. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's again, this always happens when we do one of these segments here is that you spend much more time with the smaller segment of the movie, and it just hits you a little bit differently when you're paying that much attention. So
yeah,
he chokes her out with the Force, and of course Obi-Wan now comes down the ramp. Let her go, Anakin, and they start talking. He takes off his robes. Obi-Wan checks or his outer robe, and Obi-Wan checks on Padme. And Anakin's ranting, you turned her against me. And then he responds, you have done that yourself. You'll not take her from me, is Anakin's response. And then Obi-Wan points out, your anger and lust for power have already done that. Not wrong. You have allowed this Dark Lord to twist your mind until now you've become the very thing you swore to destroy. Anakin's response is, don't lecture me, Obi-Wan. I see through the lies of the Jedi. What lies? Or is he talking about? Or is he just kind of ranting in return to try and justify his actions?
Mhm. And it always bothered me that Anakin just let Padme lie there. After all this talk about how he wanted to save her, save her, save her, you would have thought that that would have shaken his tree enough for him to go, "Oh crap, what did I just do?" This is
Yeah.
this is exactly what I've been trying to avoid. But yet all he does until he and Obi-Wan kind of circle around is he reminds me of like an animal, with their prey that he's just pacing. He's pacing back and forth and kind of looking under the lids of his eyes at Obi-Wan. He's protecting his quote unquote kill, in Padme. I hate to put it that way, but he's protecting her against Obi-Wan until he finally kind of walks away, and says, I see through the lies of the Jedi. I do not fear the dark side as you do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he walks away from Padme at that point. That is so symbolic to me.
See, it's interesting for all of the stuff that there's been in the discussion of the Force since this movie about, how you can't have the light side without the dark side, all these balance discussions and stuff like that. This really is the dark side just like welled up in him and exploding at this point. I mean, he doesn't even know what to do with this right now, because then he starts ranting. I have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire. It's your new empire.
Yeah,
First
he
off,
can't even believe it.
yeah,
He's
and
like,
then
"What
Anakin's response
are
is like,
you
"Don't
talking
make
about?"
me kill you." It's just like, we're having a conversation. When did it come to this? Now,
Mhm.
that is in fact what Obi-Wan is there to do, but also he's completely deluded himself. He's brought peace, freedom, and justice and security to the new empire. You can make an argument for peace because the Clone Wars are now over. Okay, perhaps you can make an argument for security because the Separatists have been defeated. But freedom and justice,
Yeah,
that is the exact opposite of what happens going forward from
right,
here.
right. Which, I mean, obviously, he can't predict that at this very, very moment. But again, this is what Palpatine has been chirping in his ear. So it's almost like a ventriloquist literally putting words into Anakin's mouth. And so now he's just spewing back everything that Palpatine has put into his head. But yeah, I mean, Obi-Wan is so unbelieving at this point. Like you pointed out, your new empire? Like, what the
Mhm.
heck are you talking about, Anakin? I have heard you say a lot of crazy stuff in your time, but this has got to be the cap to all of it.
Yeah, this is all kind of harkens back to Attack of the Clones when Anakin and Padme were having their picnic, and they're talking about politics.
Yes.
And she asks him, "Well, how do you think it should work?" And he says, "Well, people should get together, discuss what's in the best interest of everyone, and they should do it." And then she says, "Well, that's exactly what we do, but the problem is not everyone agrees." And then he says, "Well, someone should make them." And her response is,
Mhm.
"Someone who? You?" And he's like, "No, not me." "Well, then who?" "Someone wise, someone powerful." And so that wasn't just him teasing her. this
Right.
is this is what he bought into in this situation.
Yep. Yep. He's always kind of believed that.
Uh-huh. All right. Well, no discussion of this segment of the movie would not be complete. Anakin said, "Don't make me kill you." And Obi-Wan's response is, "Anakin, my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy." And then Anakin says, "If you're not with me, then you're my enemy." And Obi-Wan's response is, "Only a Sith deals in absolutes, and I will do what I must." And then Anakin says, "You'll try." Then they get at it. Obi-Wan lights his lightsaber, Anakin does his backflip, and they start fighting. Okay, but the only Sith deals in absolutes. This line gets picked on an awful lot because it is in itself an absolutism, right?
Mhm.
But I think that a lot of context needs to be considered when you discuss this line. What's your take on it?
Well, when you're looking at absolutes, what you've basically lost is nuance, moral gray area. And that's what makes empathy and compassion and all the things that the Jedi stand for possible. So
Mhm.
I think that's what Obi-Wan was referring to in that way, because that's essentially what Anakin has done. He is basically looking at things in a very black and white way and not allowing for any type of compassion or empathy at all.
Yeah, I think you're right there. It's and Obi-Wan is not talking about every last absolutist type of a statement someone might make. He is talking about what's going on right here. Anakin has just spelt it out. If you're not with me, then you're my enemy. And which is this, if you don't buy into everything that I'm saying right now, then we are foes on this, and I'm
Mhm.
going to kill you. And Obi-Wan's not talking about you know, the sky is always gray when it's raining, or,
Mhm.
chocolate ice cream is the best ice cream ever that everyone should enjoy, or whatever. He's not talking about those type of things. He's talking about this context here, which is there's a middle ground here. It is not black and white. It is not 100%, you know, I disagree, therefore you must destroy me. Because this is all preceded by the threat, don't make me kill you.
Mhm.
So yeah, anyways, I think people need to back off their absolutist take on this absolutist statement, I
Right.
suppose. But
Well, and it's interesting because Anakin follows that up with, "You will try." And as
uh,
we all know, one of Yoda's most famous quotes is, "Do or do not, there is no try," which is kind of an absolute if you think about
true,
it.
that is
So,
also true.
so I think there's so much more, read between the lines kind of thing, and as I said, nuance than we give it credit for sometimes.
Hmm. All right. Well, we're going to be coming back to Anakin and Obi-Wan quite a bit because the scene changes frequently here over the rest of this segment. But now we go to the Emperor's office on Coruscant, and he is busy working at his desk with Masameda at his side. Yoda wanders in and immediately force throws the two Imperial guards up against the wall. And he then
Love
turns
that.
to Palpatine and says, "I hear a new apprentice you have, Emperor, or should I call you Darth Sidious?" Emperor responds, "Master Yoda, you survived." Yoda asks him if he's surprised, and then the Emperor says, "Your arrogance blinds you, Master Yoda. Now you experience the full power of the dark side." And he immediately lashes out with some force lightning and knocks Yoda down. Very quick little scene here. The biggest thing that stands out to me right now, besides how much I love the humor of Yoda wandering in, just, can't deal with these guys.
Yeah, not
Throws
having
me to the
this.
wall. Yeah, done with
Exactly.
that. Is the Emperor saying to Master Yoda, "Your arrogance blinds you." So, and this is in response to, you know, the Emperor said, "Master Yoda, you survived," and Yoda says, "Surprised." And then the Emperor says, "Your arrogance blinds you, Master Yoda." What is he referring to there?
Well, I wonder if there was, I don't know, if there's some way, shape, or form that he could know what Mace was talking about with Yoda, where he said, our ability to sense the dark side, we can't see these things.
Uh-huh.
And so, and I also don't know if maybe that also comes from the fact that the Jedi have largely not been opposed at all in terms of their rule, quote unquote, or their justice over what they do with the Republic. And so I think in a lot of ways that really sickens Sidious. He looks at that as being, even though the Jedi were looked at in the peacekeepers of the galaxy, that's going to end up being their downfall.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think yeah, that last thing you said was I was thinking when I was considering this line, which was the arrogance of the Jedi completely blinded to the fact that they could be betrayed by the clones and they could be
Hmm.
set up in this
Right.
situation. It's just not 100% clear in the pacing of the scene that that's what he's talking about here. This notion of I think the other meaning is that he follows this by saying now you'll experience the full power of the dark side right before he shocks him with the lightning, which is you've been so afraid of the dark side of the force and you've not been open to even considering it, and you're so confident in your abilities and you're following the right path by following the light side. Now you're going to see what the dark side can really do, and you're not prepared for that.
Hmm.
But that's also saying, the dark side is behind Order 66 and the fall of the Jedi as well.
Right. Right. I have a question for you. So when Yoda faces off against Dooku, he was able to catch his force lightning and basically deflect it and even throw it back at him.
Uh-huh.
It's almost as if he was able to anticipate that, but you could see that split second when Yoda's eyes get really wide right before Sidious hits him with the Force lightning, that he truly didn't even sense it coming. So, what do you think the difference there is between Yoda sensing perhaps what Dooku was going to do versus Sidious? Do you think that it's because he had a former connection with Dooku, where he didn't really have that connection with Sidious, or what do you think the difference is?
I don't think it's that deep. I think Sidious just sucker punched him here, what it comes down to. He walked
Mhm.
into confrontation with Dooku after Dooku had already been fighting Anakin and Obi-Wan. Lightsabers had been drawn, and there they were. Yes, he was walking in expecting to eventually try and destroy Sidious in this, but he walked in and threw the guards up against the wall, and it's not like Sidious immediately leapt at him with a lightsaber or anything. So
Mhm. That's
I think
fair.
it was just kind of a sucker punch in that moment, and maybe he was being arrogant in that moment. Like I said, he just walked in and boom, there go the guards, and and there was a bit of cockiness. It's like, I hear a new apprentice you have, Emperor. Should I called you Darth Sidious? You know, he was kind of playing John Wayne in a way in that regard. So
Mhm.
yeah, maybe his confidence kind of got the best of him in that moment.
Mhm. Yeah, good points.
Yeah. Okay, so back on Mustafar, Anakin, and Obi-Wan are continuing to go at it. This fight is so good.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of which, there's 5 lightsaber duels in this movie. We've got Anakin and Obi-Wan against Count Dooku. We've got Obi-Wan against General Grievous. We've got or is it 6? We've got, well, no, it's 5. One long continuing one, but we've got Mace Windu and the Jedi confronting Palpatine. And now we've got Anakin and versus Obi-Wan and the Emperor versus Yoda. Of the 5, which one do you think is the best?
Oh, I mean, for action and for depth of emotion, it's gotta be Anakin and Obi-Wan. I mean,
Yeah.
You ask me any day, I'm gonna give you that answer. But, in terms of symbolism, yes, there's so much symbolism in the fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan as well. I mean, you're talking brother against brother. You're talking about a lot of things, but I do think that the fight between Sidious and Yoda has so much symbolism in it.
Mhm.
And the other fights were necessary and they were plot points that needed to be there. But I think these two fights are probably the most heavy in that symbolism. But my
Yeah.
favorite's always going to be Anakin and Obi-Wan.
Yeah, I think the best one is Anakin Obi-Wan. One, I think Steven Spielberg was brought in to choreograph that whole thing and direct it. And two, it's just so much more intense than anything. There's not a lot of dialogue in the heart of that duel. They say a bunch of stuff beforehand and they say some things at the end there, but you can just see on their faces and in the battle, like the unspoken argument that's happening
Mhm.
here. It's,
Mhm.
I raised you since you were a small boy. How could you betray me? How could you not have my back, Obi-Wan? Just all those things that are happening there and how well they know each other, with the way that
Right.
they have that fight there. The other thing that happens is they work their way into the facility there on Mustafar. They briefly have that moment where they're back to back. It's just kind of a spin, but
Mhm.
it made me appreciate that moment in Obi-Wan Kenobi, the series, when they're
Oh yeah.
sparring in that one room and they end up back to back and they're trying to figure out, there's a move to get out of that. And it's like, look, that was written later. I get it. But you can then inject that backstory into this, that was something that they've both learned how to pivot out of now. It's not going to work anyway. So it was just kind of a cool little backstory moment for me.
Oh, for sure. Because I mean, the two of them have been doing this dance for how long in
Oh yeah.
terms of sparring and dueling each other? And one more thing too about this particular fight is just the fact that Ewan and Hayden were the ones actually doing the fight,
Oh yeah.
which I think brings that to a whole other level. Not to take away from the Sidious Palpatine fight or Sidious Palpatine, the Sidious Yoda fight. But I mean, let's face it, Yoda was CG. So,
Right.
a lot of that stuff had to be added
Well,
and done digitally.
and so was the Emperor in many parts of that fight
Right.
as well.
Yes. Yeah, let's face it, right.
Yeah. So speaking of them, back on Coruscant in the Emperor's office, Masameda gets up and leaves. He's,
He's like,
uh,
"I'm out."
yeah, I'll be in the next room when you need me, Your Excellency. But the Emperor begins cackling, and then he, says, "I have waited for this a long time for this moment, my little green friend." And so Yoda gets up. As an aside, it's really funny. Be like every time I try and transcribe Yoda's line, Google Docs is like underlining things in blue because it's like, what is with your syntax? But
Yeah.
at any rate, uh, at last the Jedi are no more. And then Yoda says, "Not if anything to say about it, I have." And he uses a force push against the Emperor, so he gets his own sucker punch in there. And then, yeah, at an end, your rule is, and not sure enough it was. Is this the arrogance? That's Sidious. I just got so fixated on that statement. Your arrogance
Mhm.
blinds you, Master Yoda. That I'm like, well, this is some bravado from Yoda, but
True.
it's kind of like throwing back what he's getting from the Emperor in a way. I don't know if it's necessarily arrogance, but it is a little bit, I suppose. What do you think?
Mhm. Well, I think there was some good trash talking, on
Yeah.
Yoda's part, and I think that that was part of their duel, but, there is that, as Luke puts it many years later, the hubris of the
Uh-huh.
Jedi, and I do think that Yoda did kind of underestimate him because I don't know if he realizes exactly what kind of long game Sidious has been playing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yes, he's going to have plenty of time to contemplate that soon enough.
Yes, he is.
And so Emperor tries to leave. He leaps for the door, but Yoda cuts him off, which is pretty cool. And then Yoda, again, with the trash talk, "If so powerful you are, why leave?" And he pulls out his
Mhm.
lightsaber and knights it. He can do that in such a way that nobody else can mimic. But
So cool.
then the Emperor says, "You will not stop me. Darth Vader will become more powerful than either of us."
Yeah.
And this jumped off the page for me because I'm like, you know what? I think the evolution of Palpatine's intentions has really evolved since Revenge of the Sith came out here because, we all know the rule of two. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not discussed in depth inside the movies, other than the fact that Yoda says in The Phantom Menace, always two there are, a master and apprentice. And then we got all kinds of legends, the Darth Bane trilogy, where he established the rule of two and the like. And we understand that the Sith are two, a master to hold power, an apprentice to crave it. The master teaches the apprentice everything, and eventually the apprentice has to challenge the master, take him out, and then find an apprentice of his own. But the Emperor now is saying that you'll not stop me. Darth Vader will become more powerful than either. So the Sith are going to win, is what he's saying here.
Mm-hmm.
But the sequel trilogy, especially The Rise of Skywalker, challenges this whole notion that by saying that basically Palpatine was looking for immortality this entire time. And he had no intention of letting Vader ever become more powerful than him and supplanting him in this regard. That,
Right.
this has all come to a head with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a little bit of a misalignment there for sure. And I do think that some of it was, I think that Sidious, as you said, he wanted to have that immortality, but yet in this instance, I think that he is truly embodying what you were just talking about in the rule of two. And it's a very sick, twisted way of looking at things from what Yoda had said, in that we are what they grow beyond.
Right.
And he's expecting, because Vader, Anakin, is the chosen one, and so he expects him to become more powerful, and he expects him to take on the legacy of the dark side, and he's so, passionate about seeing that happen, that yeah, he wants to live on, but if he doesn't, he knows he's going to have Vader to take up that mantle. And so I think that's what he's taunting Yoda with. And maybe he doesn't actually believe that in this moment, but he wants Yoda to believe that, even though he's got that immortality card
Yeah,
in
now that
up
we're
his
talking about
sleeve.
a couple other things occur to me. One, Mace, when he was fighting Palpatine, said, the tyranny of the Sith will never return. And, Sidious was like, no, 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 in his response to that. And so I'm wondering if he's imputing the same type of thoughts to Yoda here, which is that when he says, you will not stop me, he's really saying, you're not going to stop the Sith
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
this situation. And, of course, in The Rise of Skywalker, they kind of pick up on that when he says to Rey, I am all the Sith in this
Yeah.
situation. So maybe it's not as disjointed as we think. It just doesn't come across as clearly as perhaps we would want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's a good pickup though on that, because I had not really thought about that line that specifically.
Uh-huh. And then Yoda responds to all this by saying, faith in your apprentice misplaced may be, as is your faith in the dark side of the Force. And then they begin to fight. So, back on Mustafar, Anakin grabs Obi-Wan by the throat and begins to choke him while trying to force his own lightsaber into his neck. And then Obi-Wan gets a kick in and kicks Anakin away. Anakin then drops the World Wrestling Federation dropkick
Right.
to Obi-Wan there on the table, and they both summon their lightsabers, and we peel away from that fight. I described everything that just happened in there, but is there anything else about that moment that stood out to you?
It's just so cringy every single time I watch this, the way that Anakin grabs Obi-Wan. It's
Uh-huh.
just such a betrayal. I mean, everything else that he's done, and even with force choking Padme, it doesn't seem, I hate to say as personal, because obviously it is, but to lay hands on Obi-Wan in this way, and then the way that he looks at him with
Mhm.
just that hate and disgust and disdain, it's like, oh my gosh, you really aren't your former self.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is that there's very little dialogue that's happening right now.
Mhm.
Really none between these two for the rest of this segment we're talking about. But there's no word needed. It's all in their
Yeah.
facial expressions. It's all in how, they're matching each other from blow for blow. They're anticipating what they're doing and the like. And we'll get back to something about that in just a second. But back on Coruscant, Yoda and Palpatine are continuing their fight. They leap onto the Emperor's platform and it begins to descend into the Senate. And you had suggested there was some symbolism with where they're fighting, and I 100% agree because I put this in our note that they're raising up into the Senate, which is what? The representation of the entire galaxy there.
Yes.
They're really fighting over the fate of the galaxy in this moment. And, Palpatine's attempt to control everything and Yoda's attempt to rescue the galaxy there.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the Senate has been the symbol for democracy in the galaxy, on
Uh-huh.
Coruscant, and now it's a battlefield. So
Yeah.
if that isn't symbolism right there, I don't know what is. And the fact that Sidious even weaponizes the Senate pods by throwing them at Yoda, and it's basically symbolizing the whole democracy, the idea of the Republic just turning against itself and against Yoda and the Jedi and everything, and it's just such a moral collapse in that way as well.
Right. It is the end of a sequence of things that we've seen happen where,
Yeah.
in Attack of the in the Phantom Menace, there was a coup in a way, in that there was a staged event on Naboo that allowed for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valoran, and then allowed Palpatine to be elected Chancellor. Then, when his terms were about to expire in Attack of the Clones, there was this vote of emergency power, and so his term was extended indefinitely. Then we get to the creation of an army, and then we now are in Revenge of the Sith, and we get to see the fall of the Republic. Palpatine seizes power for himself, and he's claiming peace and justice and freedom for the galaxy. But then, like you just said, he's suppressing the Jedi by using their government against them there.
Mhm.
Yeah, so this is all very, very rich in symbolism. And we'll get back
Oh,
to these
yeah.
two in just a second here. But on Mustafar, our last interaction with Anakin and Obi-Wan, as they continue their duel, we get the spinoff. They both got their lights. They summon the lightsabers and they start spinning them, only to come to that simultaneous blow of lightsabers at the same time. There, do the double force push. We were talking about how they were anticipating each other's moves, and this is another example of it.
Yes.
And then when Anakin leaps at Obi-Wan as he gets out of the way, he hits the shield control, and the shields go down on this facility on Mustafar. And then the fight moves outside, and the music switches to from Battle of the Heroes to Duel of the Fates. So really tying us back into the Phantom Menace.
Oh, yeah, and I absolutely love that double force push. There's so much to that symbolism right there in that they are truly at a standoff. But I think that the moment that the shields go down on the platform on Mustafar also symbolizes that last little shred of, at least at this point, the light side that Anakin had. It's
Uh-huh.
now it's like it's on like Donkey Kong, and he's completely shifted from Anakin to Vader at this point.
Indeed. And then, of course, the segment ends back in Coruscant. The Emperor is in the Senate hurling the pods at Yoda, as you were making reference to. Yoda, after dodging a number of them, throws the last one back. The Emperor jumps to another one. Yoda attacks. And you're talking about Yoda's ability to absorb Force Lightning. The Emperor uses Force Lightning on again, but Yoda absorbs it after losing his lightsaber. And he
Mhm.
finally pushes that attack back, but they both go plummeting off that platform they're on. And Yoda ends up on the Emperor's platform as he's kind of falling towards the ground. He tries to get a grip, but he does not, leave scratch marks on it, which is cool. And then he
Mhm.
falls off to the floor, and we see his cloak getting snagged on some wreckage there. And of course, the Emperor's off elsewhere, just cackling, whatever, as he's dangling from one of the pods. This was the first time I ever noticed the opening to the vent behind Yoda. The next time we're going to see him in the next segment is he's crawling through the vents, and he signals for Bale to come get him. But we never
Right.
see him, But this is the first time I saw that vent open behind him, and I was like, how did I miss it over the dozens and dozens and dozens of times I've seen this movie?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, every time we watch this movie, it doesn't matter. I'm always noticing something new. So, yeah. But I mean, in this particular scene, did you ever think to yourself, come on, Yoda, like, why didn't you do the same kinds of things that you did against Dooku? You were just kind of somersaulting and jumping all over the place. How could you not summon the force to push yourself back up instead of hanging on literally for dear life by the claws on his little bitty hand?
I, if I have to come up with an excuse for him, it's exhaustion here,
Yeah.
because he flees after
Mhm.
this. It's like he's got
Mhm.
nothing left. Uh,
Right.
after everything that's happened here. I mean, He just hurled, he caught a pod that Palpatine threw at him with all the might of the dark side behind him. He spun it around and threw it back. And then he went in for the kill, and Sidious unleashed Force lightning out here. I think Yoda realized that, he's got way more power in his reserves than I thought in that moment. And it was everything he could do to absorb that dark side power that Palpatine was throwing at him and then push it back. And he plummeted to the floor there. So I think he was depleted at that point.
And it goes back even to, at last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge. Sidious had all of this pent up energy that he's been waiting to release for so long. So I think you're right on that. But, the robe falling onto, as you put it, snags on some wreckage. Yoda loses his robe, and that's symbolic in and of itself too. I think just in general, the Jedi Order has been lost to the wreckage, of what has happened. And a similar thing happens even to Luke when he becomes one with the Force, and his robe kind of just flutters down. So it's very symbolic in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, we have the wreckage of the Republic, and then the Jedi have become a thing of the past here. They become one with the Force in a way. I think you nailed it with that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then there we are. That is the end of this segment. It's hard to divide this movie up compared to the other ones because so many of the segments that we try to do that are that 10 to 15 minute range, it's finding that stopping point without killing the momentum. You know what I mean? It's because so much of the last third of this movie is all action, just nonstop for so long. Like I said, it's hard to find, but you had to find a cutoff point at some point. Otherwise we'd just be talking about the whole thing, and that's defeats the purpose of the series. So, but here we are, and we will be back next month with part 11 in the series. We have at most 2 segments left. We'll see how we do with dividing this up. But thank you all for joining us for this episode and this look at Revenge of the Sith. And we hope you've enjoyed it. And if so, you want to make sure you get the next entry in the series. Make sure you subscribe to the podcatcher. You subscribe to the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. And once you've done that, we really appreciate your ratings and reviews. And if you want to find more episodes from our back catalog, and apparently you've all been doing that lately. Jay and I were just talking off air about how many back episodes have been downloaded recently. Really crazy numbers from the past. So thank you all for that. But if you want to find a lot of these back episodes beyond what your podcatcher is likely to carry, the best place to do that is retrozap.com. All previous 956 episodes are there. So again, thanks for that. Jay, remind everybody what are social media contacts and where else we can found online.
Absolutely. We are very easily found at Podcast Stardust on Facebook and Instagram. And you can also send us your thoughts on our email, which is podcaststardust@gmail.com. And we do have our 2 YouTube outlets as well. So we have the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So please head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out. Those do not have video because Dennis and I just do our audio. So you can look at a static picture, but it does allow you to share and let us know what you thought of the segment or any others as well. And check out our Pinterest boards because you'll find all kinds of fun things for everything Star Wars over there. And then last but not least, our TeePublic store, which a few of you have been picking up some products. So we'd love to see where those end up out in the wild. So please snag some pictures and post us on your Instagram or Facebook or whatever social media you use. And if you'd like to get in on 7 different Podcast Stardust logo designs, you can hit up that link in our show notes and pick up some Podcast Stardust swag.
Okay. So upcoming on the show on Wednesday, we are going to be getting into Tales of the Nightlands 1 and 2. This is a series written by Kevin Scott, available through Dark House Comics. It's kind of one of his anthology spooky Star Wars stories. And so, as such, we're going to use the first 2 to celebrate Halloween. And then on Friday, on the actual day of Halloween, we'll be wrapping up the week with some Star Wars news. But with that, just want to say thanks for listening to episode 957 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week, and until next time, may the Force be with you.